Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, I'm going to take a bunch of these Bowser HO scale 70-ton ballast cars. I'm going to weather them up to look something like this. So I got a bunch to do, so let's get started. Okay, so how this started was I came across a pretty good sale. That's usually how it goes with me. And I found these Bowser 70-ton ballast cars at a really good price. And I thought, hey, that make a really cool unit train. I really like the detail. They're not super detailed, but they're detailed enough that I think they look pretty good. Now, there's only 3 different road numbers here. I'm not going to re-decal any of them, simply because I plan on always having these together as a unit train. So I don't really see the need personally to re-decal them to different unique road numbers, because I'll always just run them together as a unit. So that part's fine for me. That saves also some time and a couple steps in the detailing process. So what I did was I weathered up the first one to exactly the way I like it, and I used a combo of acrylics and oils, and I actually glued in some Woodland Scenics ballast here, both fine and medium sized. I think the mix looks pretty good. I think it looks realistic to me anyways, because they come with a load, but the load just doesn't really look all that great to me. It's just a cheap looking load. And so made it look a little bit better there. So what I'll do is I'll treat this as an assembly line process. So for every step that I took to get to this result, I wrote down every single step in detail in my handy dandy notebook here. So that what I'll do is, starting with step 1, I'll go through each of the cars. And once step 1 is done, then I'll move on to step 2 and do that treatment to all of the cars at once. So if I ever have to stop in the middle, let's say I'm at step number 8, I know that once I'm done with step 8, I'm just going to stop there if I need to, and I'll return to step 9. That way I don't miss any cars. So every single car will get all of the steps, and I think there's 26 different steps that I took to get to this. That way everything gets done in a reasonable amount of time, and I don't miss any steps for any of them. Like if I do like a few at a time, chances are I'll miss some steps, but if I do all of them step 1, all of them step 2, all of them step 3, etc., I know they'll all get done basically at the same time. And so this will take a little bit of time because there is oils involved, so there's some drying time, maybe like 24, 48 hours between some of the applications. But this video will be edited, so you won't see all those drying times. So that'll be good for you. And I find this process really fun. It worked well for me on a previous set of boxcars that I did. I did a set of 10 boxcars in the same process, and it worked really well. You can see that video in my playlist, so just search for that. And yeah, so let's get started with step number 1 for all the cars here, and we'll go through it. Step 1 is basically taking each car out of the package, and we're going to disassemble both the trucks and remove the couplers. So what I'm going to do is just basically unscrew these, and then after I take the couplers out, I'm going to replace the bottom part of the draft gearbox here, screw that back on, so that later when I'm painting it, that piece gets hit. I don't have to paint those pieces separately. So I'm going to go through and I'll just disassemble all the cars, and we'll be right back. Step 1 is now complete. I have removed all of the trucks, wheels, and couplers from the rail cars. I replaced the draft gearbox plates here so that those get painted in that particular step. And for me, it's super important to be organized. So as you can see, I have everything in this tray here, all the trucks, wheels, screws, any broken pieces that were inside the boxes. One of the brake wheels had broken, so I'm going to try to glue that back on. All the couplers, which I'm actually going to replace with KDs. These are just cheap little plastic ones. I may keep these around to weather up and just have as details on the layout someplace. We'll see. But for me, again, super important to stay organized, especially with big projects like this. And so once I repair the one car, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so step 2 is to paint the sides of the load piece that's in here. So as you can see, it's gray. That doesn't really look very realistic, right? So I'm just going to paint it as close to this color as I can. And the closest thing I found without mixing is Vallejo's Hull Red. And so I'm just going to take some of that, paint each side, go through each car, and then it'll look pretty much like the rest of the car. So I mean, eventually it's going to receive powders and all kinds of other things, but at least to start, you won't see this gray underneath. So that's the next step, and so I'll get to it. Okay, step 3, according to my notes, is I applied a chipping effect to the logo of the car. So all I did was I took some hull red, same as I used on the inside of the car here, because it matches pretty close, and I just kind of flicked some paint over the logo, just to get the illusion that there's some chips and scratches and stuff, so maybe when they were loading the car or whatever, some of that paint got chipped away. So that's what's going on next, and so yeah, get to it. Okay, so I'm just going to take some of this paint here, put a little dab on my palette, not too much, and then just take like a stipply brush here, and I wet it, take off most of the water, and just kind of tap into that paint. So you can see it's not really runny or anything, but it's still, it has some water in there. So next, just going to take this palette knife here, and we're just going to take the brush. I'm going to test it first, make sure I like yep, that looks pretty good. And then we're just going to take this and kind of flick it against the side lightly until I like what I see, basically. That's pretty good. Alright, so I'll give it a little close-up here. Pardon the camera work. But just to give you an idea what that looks like. So that'll dry pretty close to the color of the car, and so you won't really notice it where it's not on the white. It'll all get blended in anyway, but it kind of gives the effect that there's some chips and dings and some dirt and whatever that's on there, and so that's the effect I'm going for. Now I just have to do it to 11 more cars. Alright, so now that I have the spatter put on there, I actually went around and I dull coated the entire car. Just because I'm going to start doing some airbrushing, and so I just wanted a nice base for the paint to stick. And so next I'm going to mask off around these chutes. They're on the bottom of the car, so I'm going to mask all the areas except for the chutes. I'm going to paint those a metallic gray, which is going to be a mix of XF56, which is metallic gray, and a little bit of XF2, which is flat white, just to lighten it up just a little bit, because that gray does come out pretty dark, and I want it to be a little bit lighter. So do a little bit mixing there, mask this up, spray it, and then rinse and repeat. All of the chutes on each car have been painted this light metallic gray, so it's time to move to the next step, which is to take this color that I came up with and use it to kind of lighten all the paint on all the cars. So like the paint's been sun bleached over the years, and what I did was I took some Hull Red XF9, same one I've been using with the spatter and everything, and I lightened that up using this XF80, which is Royal Light Gray. And according to the photos that I was referencing, it could have been just the color tones of the photo processing, but the cars didn't have a really vibrantly warm color to them. And so spraying this, it has a pretty warm tone. So to bring that back a little bit, I specifically chose XF80 because it's a cooler gray. And so that'll bring the warmth down a little bit and bring it more towards the color that I want to achieve after, you know, the sun bleaching effect. So that's why I went with that. So yeah, so now it's time to spray each side of all the cars and head back over to the spray booth. All 12 cars have now received some fading and have been sealed, and so now it's time to start doing some oil paints here. It's my next step. I'm going to take some raw umber and some gray of gray oil paints, and I'm going to mix them up on this piece of cardboard here. I'm going to make just basically a lighter, slightly grayer umber color. And the reason I'm doing it on the cardboard is so that when you mix it here, the cardboard will actually pull some of that oil out. Just let it sit for a little bit. And that'll mean that it's going to dry quicker when it's on the model. There's less oil in the paint. So that should speed things up a little bit. It's not going to be like, 5 minutes later it's done. I'm still going to have to let this sit for probably a couple days before I move on to the next step. But it will kind of speed things up. And my main workhorse of this step will be a number 4 chisel blender. And I'm just going to work it around inside the edges and the creases of the cars, anywhere that kind of matches what the prototype photos I'm looking at reflect. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and do it to all 12 cars. Before I get started, I just wanted to show real quick what I meant by a slightly lighter gray or umber color. So I just mixed this up on the cardboard with that palette knife that I had there. And I'm going to let this sit for a little while, let some of the oils get drawn out of it, and then I'll get started. Hey, all of the cars have had the oil paint applied. I let them sit for a good few days so that they are nice and dry. And then I sealed them all up with some dull coat. That's so that the next part of the process doesn't ruin this part. And that is taking, according to my notes, taking some raw umber oil paint, making a wash, applying it to the whole car, and then taking some burnt umber, making a wash, and applying it to the chutes in the lower portion. So what I'll do is, I'll do some of the cars, like my notes say. We'll use raw and burnt umber. A couple of cars I'll do just raw umber for the whole thing, and a couple I'll do burnt umber for the whole thing. And that's just so that there's a variation of color between all the cars, so they don't look exactly the same. So what I'll do is I'll mix some oil paint up with some mineral spirits, start making some washes, and then start going at all the cars. Okay, so the next step is to take some burnt umber acrylic paint and a stipply brush here, and I'm just gonna kind of smack it against the sides of the inside of the panels of the car, along the edges over here, just to get some variation in color, just some random patterns in there, just to kind of make it look dinged up and a little bit rusty in spots. Okay, so next step is to glue the ballast over the top of the fake ballast load. And what I did this time that I didn't do on the first one is on these 12 cars, I painted it this gray color that's pretty close to the color of the ballast. I didn't do that last time. Some of the ballast flaked off. You can really see that load that's really kind of a whitish underneath, and so I have to glue more ballast on top of that. And so this time I painted it, so if some flakes off, I don't have to keep gluing it down. It probably won't even notice it if some flakes off. So did that, and then I'm going to be using straight up full strength matte medium. I put some in this little squirt bottle that I picked up at the hobby store. Just makes it easier than trying to pour it out of this big thing. And then, like I said, I'm using Woodland Scenic's ballast over here, mix of medium and fine. Probably more on the medium side than the fine ballast, just so there's some variety in there. And yeah, so I'm going to take this brush here, pour some of this on here, paint along the edges, make sure I get nice and crisp lines along the edges, and then just sprinkle and mix this on top. And yeah, should be good to go. As you can see here, I've got the ballast all glued down, and I've done that to all 12 cars. And now I'm going to take a step away from the cars themselves and start working on the trucks and the wheels. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spray them all using this Tamiya spray paint. This is Red Brown TS1, in case you need to know the color. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to spray all of these and all of the wheels as a base, and then I'll continue weathering after that. I'm probably going to have to pick up another one of these cans now that I'm thinking about it, because this is quite a bit, but that'll be the next step. For the wheels, I'm again going to use this red-brown color from Tamiya. This adheres really well to the metal wheel sets I've found, and I'm able to weather it without chipping off the paint really easily, so I've been really happy with that. And I picked up one of these to do the job. However, it didn't really work out. As you can see, after only a couple times using it and it being really gentle, it actually cracked in several places, and so I was pretty disappointed. So instead, I came up with this, which is just a piece of wood with a bunch of holes in it and some tape. So for me, this works really well, and I can do far more, far quicker. In case you're wondering, these HO scale wheels are 3/8 inch in diameter, so I had a 3/8 inch drill bit, put it into 16 inch basswood, and just put some tape on the back, and that'll do the job. So now that all the trucks and wheels have been painted with that red-brown color, it dries a little bit light. And so what I did was I took some XF9 and XF1 and I mixed those up and made like a rusty sort of brown color, and I airbrushed randomly over the trucks, the centers of some of the wheels, and also on the couplers. These are KD148s. And so now that I have the color the way I like it, I'm going to seal all the trucks up with some dull coat, and then we'll move on to the next step. Next step with the trucks is just to take some acrylic burnt sienna and just randomly apply it in places where I think there could be some extra rust. Just being random with it, just to get something that I think looks good. Okay, so the next step on the trucks is probably one of my favorite parts in all of weathering, and that's to give this sort of metal look to the edges. You can see it, hopefully you can see it on there as I'm rotating it here. It's catching the light. It looks like it's actual metal. And the trick to that, and I learned this from watching Adam Savage from Tested, you basically take a pencil with some graphite, anything that's got graphite in it really, and you rub it along the edges to create highlights, to give it that sort of metallic type of look. If you go a little bit overboard, that's okay. You can just take your finger and rub it off again and try again. I'll show you, hopefully I can demonstrate this here. It's kind of hard in the light and zoomed in like this, so you just basically take the edge. I have to do it with my other hand. Can't do it left-handed. And then just hit the highlights, or create highlights by hitting the edges. And hopefully you can see that in the camera there. I think it's a really convincing effect. Like I said, it's one of my favorite parts of modeling or weathering, and I just think it looks really good. So all you need is, this is just a number 2 pencil, or like you can use a mechanical pencil or anything that has a stick of graphite in it, and just rub it along the edges there. So now I'm going to add some weathering powder to the inside of the cars. I made sure to dull coat all of the cars, both on the outside and on the inside ledges, to make it easier for this stuff to stick. And I'm just going to basically hit up all along the inside here, and then maybe along some of the chutes and along some of the tops of the cars as well. Alright, everything is all weathered up. Now it's just time for final assembly. Okay, so everything is reassembled and all together here under the lights on the layout, and just seeing them all together here in this cramped little space, but seeing them all together just weathered like this really adds a sense of realism to these little models. It makes you look like you're really out in the world looking at these things. So, I mean, seeing one car weathered is pretty cool, but seeing a whole unit train weathered at the same time, it's pretty cool. I had a really fun time weathering the whole thing, going through this assembly line process, and it's giving me more ideas for future weathering projects as well. So, hope you picked up some tips or tricks, or at least enjoyed it. Maybe it gave you some inspiration for weathering some rail cars that you have laying around. Maybe you want to try that assembly line process. You get a lot done in a short amount of time, and so I find it useful, and I'll definitely be honing that down and continuing to use that sort of process going forward. But that's it for now. As always, thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you next time.